Tole srečanje bo gostilo, upam, da malo več režiserjev, kot jih imamo trenutno na liniji, in bomo imeli v bistvu kratke pogovore, glavno bo potekalo v angleščini. Če imate kakršnekoli vprašanja za naše goste ali kogarkoli, pač jih napišite v chat, da jih mi vidimo, ali pa tudi na Facebooku, kjer lahko spremljate prenos tega srečanja. So I would like to welcome directors who are already here. Bruce LaBruce from Canada and Daniel Mans from Germany. And we hope that there will be also the others, 3 of them, who will connect us, like Popo Fan, who is in Berlin, Ferran Navarro-Beltrán, who is in Spain, and Laura Casador, who is in Havana. Maybe she will not succeed, but we will see. So I suggest that we start with, very simple, with Bruce LaBruce, director of the film Saint-Narcisse, which is still available today. And I will ask Miha, who made an interview with him for our catalog.
Yay!
That we can't distribute because the cinemas are closed. But I need to add that we will have a part of the festival when the cinemas will be open again. So then we will show some films from this festival, but not all. So Miha, let's go.
Thank you, Brandon. First of all, welcome all, and welcome Bruce. And first of all, congratulations to the success of your film. And so for the start, can you just elaborate a bit about the myth of Narcissus and what brought you to depicting it as a main protagonist and the main storyline in your film?
It seems like narcissism is the kind of new default kind of like sensibility in the Western world anyway. I mean, maybe the whole world. You know, this idea that everyone's a narcissist now. You know, everyone's walking around with a phone, which is kind of reflecting their own image back at them. You know, selfie culture. So it just seemed like a good starting point to investigate, you know, what that kind of narcissism means, and is it necessarily bad in every way? I mean, people talk about toxic narcissism, and but is there also a good narcissism, which is maybe the kind of ad line of the film, love thyself, you know, but maybe not love yourself too much at the exclusion of everyone else. So I love the way that someone like Cocteau like updated the Orpheus myth, you know, with Orpheus and his film Orpheus. So I just thought I'd set it in a more contemporary setting, but also set it still in the past, in the early 70s, just to show how strange it is that culture has become so narcissistic by setting it in contrast to like a period like 40 years ago. So when the female character in the film, Irene, says to her mother about the main protagonist, Dominique, she says, he only takes pictures of himself. Who does that? And when she says that, like, you realize, wow, everyone does that now. You know, it's like, it wasn't like that 20, 30 years ago, even 15 years ago. So it's like, it's something we all take for granted, but it's a narcissism, but it's all around it.
On that note, maybe why the decision to put the storyline in the 70s, or do you have any personal relationship from that era, and especially the cinematic area of that time?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the late 60s, early 70s, really all the 70s, even up to the early 80s, it's kind of like one of my favorite periods of not only history but of cinema. So, you know, I was a kid at that time, teenager kid, and it was quite people forget that it was a real tumultuous, you know, that there was a period, there was a sexual revolution that really penetrated to the, so to speak, to the interior of the United States, you know, even to the suburbs. And it was like with, you know, swinger culture, and it was a kind of libertine kind of era of freedom and sexual freedom, and all the protest movements developed, you know, from that era, like the Black movement, the feminist movement, the gay movement, all came out, started really organizing and becoming visible in the 70s. So, and the same applied to the cinema. The cinema was very, it was about questioning the conventions of cinema, questioning Hollywood as the template for cinema, questioning how even like the basic conventions, how film is made, and narrative conventions. And there was experimentation even in more mainstream, you know, films, and experimental film aesthetics. And so, yeah, and also, so my film is kind of partly inspired by this movie, The Fox, in 1967, starring Sandy Dennis, which is a lesbian story, lesbians in the woods, living in the wild, which is based on the D.H. Lawrence story. And then also Robert Altman's Images, which is about a schizophrenic character who sees a doppelganger film. There was a lot of doppelganger films, De Palma's Sisters, and also I'm just referencing one of my favorite periods of Quebec cinema. So Quebec, you know, the French speaking province in Canada, has a very, very strong cinematic history, and there was some great films made in the early 70s, particularly by Paul Allman, like Isabel, Act of the Heart, and Journey, that have these dark themes of incest, and they're very aesthetically kind of moody, and usually set in nature and having to do with religion and guilt. So so I was referencing that period of Quebec cinema.
Thank you. But the film has several storylines that kind of coexist together in the plot line. Incest, Catholic relationship with homosexuality, family relationships. Can you elaborate the whole structure and how they correlate together to create the story and the modern day depiction of this myth?
Well, part of the film is partly based on Freud's idea of family romance. So, you know, Freud had this idea that within the nuclear family, there's sexual tensions, inevitable sexual tensions, because people are in close proximity with one another. And so his idea of the Oedipus complex, etc. But you know, so those sexual tensions exist, but there are taboos in place and cultural norms to kind of to discourage any kind of actual sexual relations within that family. And what I found was that in instances where people are separated at birth, who may be blood relatives, when they are reunited as adults, sometimes they fall in love with each other because they haven't been, you know, raised in the same social environment, and they have like a sexual even relationship. So it's a very interesting phenomenon. And it's also, you know, in terms of the church, I was paralleling the mother and the father. Beatrice's house is in nature. She's like a hippie. She smokes pot. She's like the Earth Mother. She's a Wiccan. And that's contrasted with Father Andrew in the Catholic monastery, who is more, you know, associated with the patriarchy, with he's kind of like cultured, and he's a father figure with Daniel as his son, but he's having an incestuous relationship with the son, and also he's like he's gay, and he's also doing speed or some kind of weird drug. So I mean, they're kind of parallel the kind of matriarchy and the patriarchy, but the patriarchy is much more malevolent and kind of he's really insane.
On also that note, I can just continue with, you have mostly portrayed like social taboo themes in your works, especially in practically all of your movies. What's the reason behind particularly choosing these themes, and maybe the reason behind why, particularly with Saint-Narcisse, the taboo theme behind twincest, and maybe especially also homosexuality in Catholic religion?
Yeah, I mean, twincest seems to be the perfect kind of subject for a study of narcissism, because when you're presented as an identical twin with someone who looks exactly like you, and is like a mirror image of you, it's understandable for most people, I think, that there could be some kind of strong sexual attraction there. And twincest, of course, is a big genre in porn, and porn really does kind of dig into all those like sexually, taboo subjects and things that are forbidden. So it's the twincest thing is like maybe the most socially acceptable kind of incest, but there's other incest in the movie. It's like the relationship between the mother, Beatrice, and her young companion, Irene. Irene is the daughter of her former dead lover, who looks exactly like her. So it's like she's almost, Irene is both her daughter, kind of symbolically her daughter, or like because it's her lover's daughter, but also she's has an intimate relationship with her. It's implied that they have a kind of intimate sexual relationship. So there's that incest, and then the relationship between the father Andrew in the monastery and the other twin, Daniel, is also coded as incestuous. So there's all kinds of incest going on, and also narcissism. There's the obvious narcissism of the twins, but then in a way, Father Andrew and the mother Beatrice are kind of narcissistic characters themselves, because they pursue their desires and break these taboos without really thinking or without regard to how it might affect the people that they're, the loved ones that they're pursuing their desires with. So they're kind of a bit selfish and self-absorbed characters as well on that level. So and in terms of the Catholic homosexuality and the Catholic Church, I mean, it's a well-documented subject. It's something that's many movies have been made about, but in my version, they really do have a kind of a relationship, like almost like a married couple. I mean, they've and one thing that isn't talked about a lot in the Catholic Church is that it's not just the kind of exploitation of boys, but there's a kind of like a lot of adult gay relationships within the hierarchy of the Catholic Church. So so that makes that whole relationship between Father Andrew and the young monk more complex and disturbing, because the young boy kind of has Stockholm syndrome. Like he he doesn't know any better and he doesn't know anything different. So he's developed a kind of love relationship with the priest.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Most of your work, not only in film, is especially based on irony and humor that is kind of unique to your work. What place does that hold in general in your artist practice, and why using that that medium or that language?
Yeah, it's irony and also camp, you know. Camp is a very specific, you know, queer coded language that is characterized by kind of the artificial, the theatrical, the melodramatic, which is, you know, female melodramas from classical Hollywood are really influential for me and for a lot of gay male directors. But I mean, this idea of fetish, most of my films are about some kind of fetish, but I treat fetish in a very different way than is expected. For me, I can find a kind of romance in a fetish where other people don't really see it. Like people might think a certain kind of fetish, whatever it might be, an amputee fetish, a foot fetish, as something kind of disgusting and degrading, but I see that it can be kind of romantic. It's like the whole idea of fetish is the worship of the love object. You know, it's like a reverence for it. It's almost like a religious or a spiritual connection with this love object because it's revered. You know, so but I present it in a kind of ironic way where I take that degree kind of to the point of almost hyperbole where there's a real romance to it. So I use like romantic music in a scene that's depicting a taboo that most people might find disgusting, and just showing them emotions of the characters, that it's not just a fetish isn't just a kind of random detached kind of sexual perversion, but there's actual emotions there, and like I said, even like a spirituality to it, or can be. So I've always done that. And in terms of presenting even pornographic or, you know, sexually explicit imagery, I've always done it in a very kind of ironic way in terms of well, not ironic exactly, but I show it's romantic, but I also show it as awkward or you know, something that is not this perfect kind of like act that you see portrayed in movies, in mainstream movies and porn. It's always like this beautiful kind of moment of pleasure and ecstasy, and quite often it's a little more awkward and boring even than that. So.
I would like to just congratulate you for receiving the Tom of Finland Foundation award this year. That was just like last month or a few weeks back.
Yes.
What does this mean to you to be acknowledged from the peers that work in the same artistic field for you? And maybe for my last question also, do you have anything new in your work?
Tom of Finland has been quite an inspiration for me since I was a kid. It kind of showed me that not to be afraid of to be somewhat, you know, pornographic in my work, or totally pornographic, but also that aesthetics are really important. You know, like he had a very, very strong aesthetic that was highly developed and permeated his work. So and he had a lot of humor in his work as well. So and there's a camp aspect to it as well, in its exaggerated kind of depiction of gay male sexuality. So so I've had a relationship with the foundation, the Toma Finland Foundation, for a number of years now, and I've gone to their art fairs before, and Dirk and Dirk, who runs the foundation, and Sharp are kind of really supportive of all sorts of arts, and it's really impressive the way that they've expanded and become inclusive, and they have like trans artists and lesbian artists, and involved very much involved in their whole project to display sexual art and preserve it. And so that was, yeah, a big honor. In terms of what I have coming up now, I have a book out right now that's called Death Book, which is based on my photos and Polaroids of, it's all the most extreme imagery, bloody and violent and sexual imagery from a retrospective kind of from my work. And that's from Baron Books. And then I have, I'm working on another book of photography. This is like a COVID hobby or project, you know. I'm going through my archives of photos, and another book coming out from Milos Mestis Publications next year called Fixations. And then I have at least two, I think 3 movies in development, one of which we hope to shoot in Mexico at the end of next year. So.
Great. If anybody has any questions, feel free to ask or just write in chat. I kind of closed my part now. Are there any questions from the others that are in chat?
Not now.
Okay, then first of all, thank you, Bruce, for
thank you
for this moment.
Thank you, Bruce.
Yes.
I hope we will see you next time.
I'm dying to come back to Ljubljana. I've been twice.
Twice? I remember when was Hustler White.
I was there with Hustler White, and I believe I was there with Otto, maybe.
Otto?
I remember with Otto or with Raspberry Right. I can't remember.
I don't remember.
Yeah. But I do remember
we screened almost all your films on the festival.
Yeah. I remember having a great dinner, being at the table at a great dinner with Ulu Grosbard.
Oh.
Which was he was a great guy, very, very entertaining night.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye-bye. Bye.
So now
have a good interview.
Thank you.
Thank you. Enjoy.
Now I will welcome director from Spain, Ferran Navarro-Beltrán. Could you unmute you? Hello. Could you unmute you? We can't hear you. Okay. So, in fact, I would like to ask you just to present your film.
Perfect.
You said that you are in a hurry. So how did you make the movie? How did you find the persons for the people who were capable to speak in front of the camera, and so on and so on?
Okay. The project was born as a short film, and I wanted to meet the people. I went to an association called Fundación Jazz. It's a foundation that helps people, elder LGBT people. And then we start with seven interviews. But every time I met one person, they introduced me new persons. At last, they were 24 people. So I talked to my producer and I say, okay, we have to do a long film, not a short film, and especially because all they said it was really interesting and important, and I thought that it was really, yeah, it was necessary that people listen that stories.
So you decided in the beginning that there will be only people from Barcelona.
Yes, yes, yeah. I focus in Barcelona, and in fact is in Catalan and Spanish, the film, because in Barcelona we talk Catalan.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I think that they exist other projects in Spain, and I would like to focus more in the cities Barcelona, and in fact is Barcelona. It was the beginning of the movement in Spain. It was the first demonstration, LGBT demonstration in 1977, and after that Spain has been working, but the beginning was Barcelona.
Yeah, but I suppose that in Catalonia under Franco regime it was even worse. It was more difficult to live, especially for Catalans.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, but I don't know. I think that in the 70s, the Franco's dictatorship, it was a little bit more less aggressive. Okay,
Okay.
they call open, but I don't like to that word. And it started all that LGBT movements illegal in that time, but after in 75 when Franco's dead, it begins to be more open. Yeah.
But after, so how was the film? Did you show the film, screen the film also in the cinemas already in Spain, or on the festivals, or only online, or you
Yeah.
have not? The film is not in good time.
Yeah, with COVID it's all complex, and it's in fact is the third festival. Okay, the premiere was in November,
Yes.
1 month ago, so we are starting with festivals, and we are searching for a distribution in Spain in order to get the theaters, but yet we don't know if we get it, but we have the television from Catalonia. It will be in TV show, and I hope that also in theaters.
Yeah. And the cinemas are open now in Barcelona. The
Yeah,
theaters.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah. Only third part of
Okay. Yeah.
the
Understand.
audience. Okay,
Understand.
but yeah.
Uh,
We are a little bit more open than month ago, but it's a strange situation. Yeah.
but are you a freelancer as director, or you have a job?
Yeah, I normally work as a graphic designer in cinema as well.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, with the art department, I do decoration and all that kind of things.
And did you get any support from the government now because of the epidemic? I just
Yeah,
want
yeah,
to ask you some things about the situation now.
yeah. It's not easy to get it, but if you have problems and you can show that you don't get money, you have help from the government. But
Okay.
in my case it's not that, because I have work
Mhm.
in series and cinema and films. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you have any new project for the future?
Yeah, I just have finished my first feature film script.
Okay.
Yeah, it's I don't know how to say it. It was born as a short film. It's called Forget Me Not.
Yes.
It's my second short film, and I have grow it as a feature film.
About.
It's about two women, lesbian women. Yeah, it's also elder people. More, yeah, they have 65 years old, and one is a Catholic and traditional woman, and the other one is an open lesbian, and they meet, and I have focused in the Catholic one because I would like to talk about that problem, not being lesbian and Catholic, how you can manage that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe any questions? Simona is also a filmmaker, and I push her to make a similar film with older people in Slovenia. Do you have any questions, Simona?
Yeah, I would just like to invite you that, of course, when you finish your next film, please send it to our festival. We are really eager to get some more lesbian films, because there's not that many actually.
Okay.
Yes, and good luck, and also congratulations for this one. I also think it's very important to see older people on the screen.
Thank you. I will do it.
So thank you very, very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank
you. We will go to Daniel, because Daniel he's here he's here from 6 o'clock. Daniel Mans, hello.
Hello.
Hello to Berlin. The
Hi.
cinemas
Nice
are
to be here.
closed.
The cinemas are closed, yes, they
of
have been
course.
for over a month, yeah.
And Polona is here. She will ask you some questions.
Yes, Daniel, hi. We already talked through the emails, but now we can at least see each other through the screen. So first of all, I would like to make a short introduction. So Daniel wrote, directed, and also co-produced film Between Summer and Fall. You choose to make a lesbian love story. How come? What inspired you to make this film, which is also your first film? This has to be mentioned.
Yeah, that's right. That's my first feature. I mean, this question came up, of course, a lot. Why I'm doing this kind of. It always sounds kind of strange, but I had always many of my closest friends, female friends, were in relationships with women, and so it never seemed to be something very special. So it was kind of a normal thing, and it was also we would watch films that had homosexual relationships between women as themes, and we would discuss them in context of other films, and it was always this thing there where it is the coming out part is always the center of the story, and after the coming out is overcome, and everybody knows you are a woman who likes women, I'm a woman who likes women, now everything's fine, and we ride into the sunset together. And that's, I mean, it's an important part of what people and my friends are and were going through, but life is so much more complex, and lesbian relationships are at least as complex as heterosexual relationships are, and we never really find that space in movies. You know, it's always either just the part of the coming out where you have the special circumstances, a very repressed family and a very open one or something like that, these tropes, or it's within a more exciting kind of story where you have like something to build up the love story. Even with heterosexual stories, you have, you know, like two gangsters, two families who hate each other, or gangster love on the run, or what have you. And I wanted to make a love story, or tell a love story that was closer to our daily life experiences with love, because I think that's a story that's kind of interesting enough, but never given its due in movies, especially because it's never been. And I want to tell you know, you meet somebody and you ask yourself what you expect of that other person and yourself, when you fall in love, and discovering that about yourself and the other person. And that's something that I think goes for all of us when we meet somebody, not necessarily what gender we ourselves are and the other person is. And that was kind of the thing I wanted to tell. And it, for me, it's just really a love story between two people, and not necessarily a lesbian love story. that is something special or controversial. Actually, there was a radio interview when we were just shooting it, and the moderator made some kind of remark and like it's this kind of controversial theme, and I was like, what is he talking? You know what? Because I really and it took me a second, like oh yeah, right, it's two women. You know, it's because in my head it was these two characters and wasn't necessarily something that sets it apart in itself from every other love story.
Mm-hmm. So Lena and Eva are two main characters in the film, and the film shows the continuation of their story, coming of age story. Actually, they come together and they fall apart, and then come together again. How did you choose to make the decision to have this sequel of the story?
It was also something that I wrote a very long time on this. I actually had this idea many years ago, many years before I wrote the screenplay, and then always like set it aside, but always came back to that story. I thought I wanted to do something more clear in terms of plot as my first feature, and not something that is so heavily on basically character and emotions, but more easily telling a story, because with this it was for me very difficult to find a way for me to make it interesting without kind of, you know, selling out what I was trying to do, you know, having big emergencies or drama and, you know, somebody dying or getting sick or, you know, having a baby or these things that would have taken away from this very intimate personal thing I wanted to tell. And another thing is that, you know, as I said before, this part of where you have always this question of happy end in the movies, you know, where you have even, and that's not on lesbian love stories, but on all love stories, you know, a Hollywood movie, if they overcome that one obstacle and kiss, then it's the end of the movie and they live happily ever after. And in real life, it's, you know, when you meet somebody and you decide that you want to be together, whether it's complicated up to this point or not complicated at all. When you kiss somebody, it's not the ending of the story, it's the beginning, you know, and we all have kissed somebody and it wasn't the end of the movie. And that was kind of what I wanted to tell, apart from the fact that I know many people who know can't seem to find a way to work it out and separate for a while and then maybe get back together and it works out for many years, or if it's just another try and doesn't work out. But also this complexity that it's not simply because you decide you want to be together and you kiss, that's not the end of the movie. And that's the kind of feeling I wanted to give the film, that a friend, director friend of mine, very early when I told her the story and she read the first draft of the expose, she said, oh, you know, it's like before sunset and before sunrise in one movie. And I was like, oh yeah, right. that's kind of an approach that you have this gap in between, but you tell the story further and you get another feeling for the characters and can redefine them in a different way towards each other. And at the end, you don't really know what will happen to them, but you feel that you can leave them for now.
How did you choose two main actors? Did you have any auditions or?
Yeah, we had actually that I wrote the parts with nobody in mind. You know, I didn't have any actors for that, and actually we were very big because we had no money whatsoever. This film was produced for what's like the catering budget on other movies for a day, which was the whole money we had. So everybody was really working for very little or no money at all, and we almost were ready to shoot a year before we actually shot the film with a completely different cast, because I had gone through the casting process and I found two very great actresses, one of whom is quite a star in Germany now, and we shot a teaser trailer to get some money, and we weren't able to get the money together that year, and so the first the one and then the other had to leave the project, And so I went through a casting process where I I saw 20 actresses for each part over time, and by that I mean that I didn't necessarily wrote them here, sent me a scene or something like that, but I sent the screenplay to people who I thought were interesting for either part, and then I talked to them and if possible met with them, because I want to see what their feeling was towards the screenplay. More importantly, because I think the casting process where you really have you go into a cold audition and have to play with someone else, that's a very difficult process for actors, and I have much respect. So I wanted to, only if I was sure that they were really interesting for the part, I wanted them to have to go through that. And so we went through castings, and we had to find two women who were working well with each other in those parts. They shouldn't, that the dynamic would play out.
And you also said that the chemistry in the film crew was really good, because otherwise the film wouldn't be able to be made because of the financial problems.
Yeah, we had a great team. I mean, there were like several people I've worked with before and who were friends with me, and they were the producers on this film, and they really worked very hard to make this happen with this like no money at all. And we had many great supporters, from like a restaurant that gave us food for almost the entire 4 or 5 weeks that we shot, and companies that gave us their equipment and camera equipment and stuff like that, and a cameraman who's a very great DOP. I worked with him on many music videos in the past 15 years, and I was very happy that he could make it and shoot the film. And so there was very many great people who really donated their time, and that makes me very proud, because they wanted to see this film.
What was the reaction of the public? Because the film was filmed already in 2018, so before COVID time. You were lucky then, and you were able to screen the film in the cine screens. So what were the reactions of the public?
Yeah, actually, we filmed a while before it had its premiere, and it had its premiere before COVID was a theme at all. I was very happy. We had our premiere at a wonderful festival here in Germany, in Hof, in Bavaria, Hofer Filmtage, which is a very prestigious and very has a great tradition, this film festival. And they there are not only film people in the crowd, but really people from the city, and people who just love movies. And that was very exciting to see, because I didn't know what to expect when we first screened it, because we had one like test screening with people who we knew but who didn't know the screenplay, just to check if people could actually understand the whole thing. But we never really had, before that premiere, we never had any screenings at all, not even before, because we finished very close to the premiere date. And when we had this Saturday night screening, which was completely sold out, as like in this in this 250 seat theater, and people were really reacting to the film, that was just a very overwhelming, because it has this kind of sense of humor, not like jokes laughing out loud, but it has this kind of dialogue humor, how the two women connect over humor, making jokes with each other and joking things away, but also this situations that are kind of where you might have to laugh. And we had this test screening when nobody made a sound, and I only realized after that screening that they did that because they were like taking notes. And in that premiere screening was so exciting, because people were laughing and reacting and really getting to it. And that was very great experience for me.
And for my last question, what are your plans for the future film projects? What are you doing now?
I'm right now. I mean, it's really tough. And afterwards, I mainly work, doing documentaries and earn my money mostly with like commercial stuff to just keep over water. Right now, there are 2 documentary projects that I've been working on, like film historic documentaries that we hoped to be able to shoot this year, and then COVID came, and now I'm waiting like everybody for this thing to be over. And feature film wise, I'm writing on a couple of things, but it's still taking time. I'm still in development.
Okay, thank you for joining us. I wish you all the best in the future, and hope to see you sometimes in Ljubljana in the future also.
Thank you. I hope to be there. I was looking very much forward to this festival and with emailing with you and Prana, and I hope that I can be there in the future.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So see you next year for the workshop.
Yeah, that would be great.
Okay, bye.
Okay. Then I'll log out. Thanks.
And I see that Laura from Cuba, from Havana, didn't come. And so Popo, hello Popo, can you unmute you?
Yeah.
Okay, how are you?
I'm good. I just woke up. At like 10 minutes before 6 o'clock.
Oh my God.
I set up an alarm, but it's sunny today. It was sunny today in Berlin, so everybody trying to take a walk, and then I come back and it was really tired. And so when you take a nap in the afternoon, how hard it is to wake up. But I succeed to be here before. Exactly at 6 o'clock.
So what do you do now in Berlin? Then you can't shoot films or what?
There is a lot to do besides shooting, for a filmmaker. And I'm writing 2 scripts of mine. Actually, one is I'm doing changing and editing, and the other one I just started writing both of them are shorts, and also have editing on some old footage of mine and trying to make a documentary out of it. So basically, quite those projects make me quite busy.
So I will ask Simona, who saw your film Beer several times, so she will have questions for you.
Okay, thank you, Brenna. Hi, Simona.
Hi. So you live in Berlin. How long have you been based in Berlin?
For a bit more than 3 years.
Mm-hmm. So was this? I saw that you also wrote the script for the film, and you also act in the film Beer. Is it inspired by a true story?
Oh, partly. So I don't remember what part was real, what part was fiction. So even sometimes my producer just asks me, "Are this real? Did this really happen? Sounds like familiar. Did you tell me something like that before?" Really? I don't remember. No, that's not true. Then could not happen in life. Or these days I also feel magic that what I wrote could happen after I wrote a script, or even after I made a film. Like sometimes I feel, oh my God, don't say that. It sounds like the lines in my script, and then people really say that in their life. So these are quite weird, but somehow, because when I come to Berlin to do research for my feature script, which I never really finished because there's so much disturbing in life, and I had collected so many stories, and also almost making notes from all different encounter. So I would say all those stories are kind of from life, but not necessarily happened.
And this film is, in your film, you are playing with stereotypes a lot, I see, and it's erotic and funny. Is this your first comedy?
Yes, yeah. Before that, I've been like last time when I was in Ljubljana last year, I showed earlier documentary films of mine back to from 2009 until 2016 I was making only documentaries in China, and then I made I started to make a short movie from 2016, and but never really this kind of atmosphere. Was more cinematically most slower, and also story are usually sadder. But when I gave this the script to my producer of Biobia, and she was like, "Oh, congratulations! You finally find your real personality. You don't have to pretend miserable in your films." So, but I always say I have to tell her, I have different sides in my life and in my personality. There is a miserable kind of Popo Fan in my heart, but normally don't showing to people except in the movie. But the comedy is the thing that I am really interested to do, and actually the two new news projects are both kind of comedy-ish.
Is it also the first time that you act in the film?
I acted in other people's projects, and only some small roles, and usually they want me to act like someone like 18 years old. So I so that's also partly from in my script. Okay, I have to be this 20 years old person in other people's film, but to just be myself in my own project. But I never imagined that I could be directing and acting at the same time. This was really challengeable. But honestly, I was not my first choice because of the budget, we could not fly anyone from China, and also that Chinese community is not really that big here in Germany. And also I find someone else, but they don't want to do the kissing in the gay kissing in the film, and in the end, and another person, he could not memorize all the dialogue. So in the end, I said, okay, with the encouragement of my producer, and I did it myself.
So the actor is not authentically gay?
No. In the end, I don't know. I just mean that I try to persuade someone not gay to act it, because I really like his acting. But in the end, he didn't. He was not gay, and he didn't want to. He didn't mind to act as a gay, but he didn't want to do the kissing. Which I understand, because people have different choice, and we don't want to force anyone, right?
We all thought that your visual style is very strong in this film. Were you inspired by some other director or style?
What's that film? I always forget the title of the movie. So one inspiration is let me just quickly search. It's Hiroshima, My Love. Hiroshima. I feel that kind of relationship in such a strange place, and of two people with different cultural background. When I was writing the script, I've been thinking about that. Even that was not comedy at all, and so also I'm a big fan of. I always try to quote Hong Sang-soo, the Korean director, and so I really like his cinematic style. And in the end, we decided to make it black and white for the early morning and night thing, and then later become colorful.
Yeah, Brane texted that Fassbinder is also evident, the style of Fassbinder.
Yeah, Fassbinder is one of the reasons I decided to come to Germany.
Really?
Yeah.
So you wanted to get more influenced by Western artists? Is that behind your decision to be in Berlin?
I think what artists like Fassbinder did was very universe. I feel no matter on the east or west, and I started to watch his film when I was in when I was teenage, and when I just went to study film, and I immediately feel, wow, how come it works like this? I just don't have any cultural connection with this person, but when I watch his film, I totally feel his words. So that's magic, and I hope also my cinematic language can also be a way to communicate different communities, and bridging East and West, and Asia and European, and or different places.
Mm-hmm. And did you want to give some kind of a critic of Berlin nightlife in your film?
After talking shit about it for such a long time, talking about our racist encounter and sexist encounter and whatever, and complain about it, but after it is literally closed for almost a year now, and doesn't seem to be going to open soon, and we really miss any kind of clubbing culture. And whatever music you play you just play Taylor Swift in Kit Kat, I don't mind, I would just go and dancing. But now Kit Kat, I just passed by Kit Kat. It is a big club in Berlin, and where I did my research a lot. And I just passed about today, and it turned into a COVID quick test place. And
Kit Kat? Are you saying Kit Kat club?
Yeah, so the club name is Kit Kat, but so it's quite iconic. People go there and party every weekend, and usually there is a very long queue. But today, now there is even the queue was even longer, because they turned this club space, the giant clubbing place, into a COVID taste spot, and there was even there were even more people waiting outside. And I assume those people who had been there and dancing and clubbing, they would totally miss that kind of atmosphere. I think I heard they will also play some music inside when people go inside to get tasted, but also that's not for the purpose of dancing, maybe just for people to remember what it was. And I do think that those space has been quite important, city space, urban space for people meet each other, no matter sexually or not non-sexually.
I read in the Wikipedia that you are LGBT activist in China. I mean, now you're in Berlin, but before, how is it to be activist in China? Did you encounter also as a filmmaker some censorship?
Yeah, that's but that's not a bad thing you can do. That's not the easiest thing you can do in the world, because in China, even though being LGBT, being gay, homosexual was decriminalized into 1997, and deleted from being a mental disease from 2001. But there is strong censorship on media and filming about it. So there is very, very little representation about LGBT community. And moreover, Chinese authorities very beware of any kind of any format of civil society. So this gave me a lot of challenge to NGOs. So I was involved with the Beijing LGBT Center for a very long time as a board member, and I've been seeing them had got problem, and but they still insist on doing good stuff for the community. The other role is that I'm also an organizer of Beijing Queer Film Festival since 2007. So I totally admire all the work what you guys has been doing, and being one of the oldest queer film festival all over Europe. And that's not easy to continue this in anywhere, because now you have to deal with funding and programming, and you keep your team being active, and have a relationship with audience, and attract young people or whatever, or covering different topics. That's not that's very quite hard. And moreover, in Beijing, we also had to deal with still need to deal with censorship, and every year we have different strategy. But this year, even I could not go back to Beijing, but I really appreciate the power of internet. I managed to moderate a panel, and also organize a few screenings. So when I was doing moderating the event, and I feel it's so weird that probably we are one of the most unstable film festival in this world. But this year it just happened to normally, and they could sell 80% of the seats in the space at the French Institute and Goethe Institute. But meanwhile, most of the festivals, the bigger LGBT film festival had to be held virtually or with limited capacity. So it's just such a weird feeling.
My last two questions before maybe other people ask something. How did you get funding for this beer, and how long did you film it?
We filmed it for 3 nights, and it was quite hardcore, because it's all the thing happened in early morning time, and so if you have one shot from one angle at 3 o'clock, and then at 4 o'clock, and another angle from at 4:30, the light was already quite significantly different in a summer day, early morning. And so we were literally fighting with the change of the light, and it was really exhausting. So if you shoot until morning, until 6 a.m., you go back home, you won't sleep at 7 o'clock, and you will be suffering until 10 o'clock. And then you know that the next day, when the night falls, you need to go out again to continue the shooting. So I really appreciate the effect of the whole team. And as I also heard the earlier panelists talking about also contribution for people from cast and crew, and because we have really limited budget. So for this film, I pitched to expose the queer film short fund, queer short film fund in Berlin, and luckily I got support from them, some cash, and also a coupon for renting. So we got free equipment with sponsorship. But in the end, we managed to shoot it with this budget, and then I did crowdfunding for the poster production. So in the end, we all managed with such a limited budget. So I feel that's also, it's my second project in Berlin, but already make me feel, I love the creativity and the energy of the creative scene in this city. So make me feel more connected with the film scene in Berlin.
Nice. Does Brane maybe or other Miha, Polona have some question? Do you want to add something, Popo? Do you want to add something?
I want to say the only thing I want to say thank all of you for doing this, and I'm also dying to go back to Ljubljana because I had such a great memory there, and I really appreciate the city and also your festival.
Thank you. We hope we can host you in the next years soon, hopefully.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
So,
thank you.
Laura didn't come from Havana, so we can't ask her. She's working on a new film in Cuba. Jaz se lahko zdaj samo vsem še zahvalim za sodelovanje pri tem pogovoru in srečanju z 4 režiserji letošnjih filmov. Danes se zaključujejo tudi projekcije, se pravi tako na Cinesquare kot na Vimeo. Mislim, da bodo jutri znani rezultati, kater film je dobil najvišje ocene publike, in potem bomo pač to tudi razglasili. Takoj pa, ko bodo kinodvorane spet odprte, sicer verjetno v polovični kapaciteti, bomo organizirali še tak podaljšek festivala v Slovenski kinoteki, kjer bomo zagotovo predvajali 3 filme, ki niso, za katere nismo imeli dovoljenja za internetno predvajanje. To so južnoafriški film Mofi, potem angleški film Amonit in francoski dokumentarec Punčka. Po vsej verjetnosti pa jim bomo dodali tudi film, ki bo dobil najboljše ocene publike, ali morda še kakšnega, to bomo videli, skratka, in o tem razmišljali, ko bomo na poti k odprtju kinodvoran. Hvala lepa za letos. Obisk je bil neverjetno, v bistvu rekorden, kar pa še ne pomeni, da bomo drugo leto nadaljevali s to prakso. Upam, da ne. Hvala. Adijo.